Morning, guys. It's bright and early, 5:45 a.m. I'm up and I'm at it, and I had a couple of requests for videos yesterday. First thing I want to point out is I won't be driving while I do videos anymore. I appreciate the concern and the feedback on that. So that is done. These videos going forward will all be stationary, so we'll do them either from the house or in the car parked, if that works for you. Today, I'm going to address a couple of things. I think they tie together. So I had a question about why coaches try to please their clients. In a sense, they they worry more about what their client thinks of them than the value that they can create. I think this will tie into that. The other is why we people please, and I'm going to go into that as well. So I'm going to cover. I've got some points on the screen here that I'll cover. I think the big thing is that we live in a society where compliance is taught and created from youth. I mean, from the time we're kids, we're taught that you obey, that you don't question, and if you question, then that's an issue, and there's a cost to that. Stanley Milgram did some tests. I think it was back in the 60s. Where they set up a room with actors, and they put people behind a wall, these actors, and they would have a person come in, and somebody of authority would go in and say, okay, if this person answers wrong or does this thing wrong, then you need to shock them. And so they had different levels of shock that they would administer to these people behind the wall. And so the people that were taking the test had no idea that they were actors. They just thought they were involved with this. Well, there was a level from 1, let's say, all the way up to 10, where 10 was lethal, where it could kill them. And so as the person was there, the researcher would come in and say, yeah, they did it wrong, shock them. And so the person would immediately shock them. And they'd hear these screams in the other side, and at first it wasn't a big deal, but as they kept going, the levels increased, and the researcher would come in and say, you need to increase the level. And the person doing it would just increase the level. They don't want to question the authority of the person that was running the test. And so they took them all the way to the top level, a level that would be lethal. And rather than question that, these people would just go ahead and shock the actor on the other side of the wall because of the authority figure that was telling them to do that. We saw this occur in Germany with the Holocaust camps. Is people wouldn't say anything because the authority said it was okay. We see that today. If our leaders say we do something, many of us will just follow and do it without questioning. There's an authority complex. So we do that with our parents, teachers, leaders. It's this idea that we need to comply and obey and listen. Yeah, I've seen it. I grew up in a highly religious background, and you didn't question. If you had a calling, or we called it calling, right? You had to do something in the organization, and you had to teach. You didn't question whether you did that. You just did it because that's what you were taught to do, to be obedient without questioning. And so that's kind of tough when you're raised in that environment and you don't question anything. And don't take this as swinging the pendulum that you need to question everything. It's just a matter of this is the environment that we were raised in. What I like is that, well, let me just go back and explain the different areas of our lives. Richard Paul Evans talks about 5 kingdoms, and he talks about us being at the center of that kingdom. So we take care of us first, and then outside of that comes family, and then outside of that comes friends, and then acquaintances, and then the world. So you've got 5 layers of kingdoms, so to speak. So the primary is us and what aligns for us. But what we tend to do is we go out to layer 3 or 4, which in this case might be a church, teacher, organization, and we say, you know what, you come into layer 1 and you dictate what I do in layer 1. And we allow them across all of our boundaries, and we allow those people in, and they kind of dictate what we do. It's in a sense, we want to be accepted. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, after food, shelter, and security are met, the next need is acceptance. We want to be accepted by society and people. We want to be loved for who we are. And so, in a sense, to be loved, we take that first layer and we allow people from the fourth and fifth layer out into our first layer, and we become out of alignment. And we start to feel that pressure of, I don't want this, but I'm allowing it in. I don't have boundaries anywhere. So it's all blended together and it's a mess. And my life isn't working because I'm allowing people from the second, third, fourth, fifth layer into my first layer to tell me how I should live my life. Well, that's not how it should go. You should look at what aligns for you personally as an individual. What aligns for me? If somebody's in my second layer, if that's a relationship, somebody I'm married to, they're going to have their own first layer. We should be able to go along like this, parallel, together, not having that person come into our layer, across our boundaries to tell us how we should live our lives. And so what happens is we're not really clear on what aligns for us, and we allow others to tell us what aligns for us, and that's the issue. With boundaries, the big thing is to, one, decide what your boundaries are. So what aligns for you? So think of that. Does this align for me? Does this feel like what I want for my life? If it doesn't align for me, am I communicating clearly to that other person that this doesn't work for me? When you start going online and you start sharing things, there are going to be people that come on and they want to tell you their way, and they want you to believe it the way they see it. I have some followers right now that they'll come on and just say, I disagree with you, which is fine, but they also say it in a way like I should agree with them. I don't have to agree with you. If we have different views, you can have your view, I can have my view. I don't have to take yours into my first layer. I hope that makes sense. So when we're people pleasing, what we're doing, in a sense, one way is we want to be accepted, basically. And so what we're doing is we're allowing other people who might be authority figures, maybe on the second, third, fourth layer out, to come in and tell us how we should live our lives. And instead of being authentic to ourselves and what aligns for us, we start to blend and be that person or that organization or that group, and we start to live our lives according to what we think they want. And that's a challenge because we lose our authenticity. What aligns for you? When my ex and I got divorced, we had to look at what aligns for each of us. The reality is we were so enmeshed and so entangled in each other's lives that when it came apart, it was like ripping apart everything about us. And so that shattering that you feel comes from that enmeshment of not having boundaries. And so when she took off, well, that's not fair. When we decided to split our relationship, that enmeshment came apart and it was rough. And what I see going backward is if we would have allowed ourselves to be individuals and honored what aligns for each of us, then we could have gone along on a parallel path, potentially, not necessarily a guarantee. But we could have honored what aligns for each of us and gone on our own paths together, but separate. What I see with relationships, religion, governments is that they want to come into our first layer, tell us how to live our lives. We do the same to them, and then it's just all enmeshed, and it's just a nightmare. And so when you look at people pleasing, where are you operating from? Are you allowing those people to come into your first layer and tell you how to live your life? Does it align for you to do that? And man, I have this tendency to do speech to text, so I want to say period or question mark after every comment. I'll try not to do that. But think about this. What aligns for you, and are you communicating it clearly to those that are in relation with you? And if you're not communicating it clearly, what are you afraid might happen? What are you afraid of? And going back to the basics of fear is, can you feel that fear and honor and respect what aligns for you and communicate that in a way that has that other person know that, hey, I see it from your point of view, but I also need to be clear, and I get to be clear on what aligns for me, and I'm going to honor that. And so if that works for you and that aligns for you, we can go forward together. If that doesn't align for you, then we need to part ways. That's a hard decision. You know, in some cases that might be a split relationship. That might be leaving a business. Really consider what aligns for you as an individual. Write that down. Communicate it clearly without getting angry and hostile. And honor your boundaries. Don't let people come into your first lair and tell you how to live your life. I hope that makes sense. I think what happens, so Stephen McGee, this goes back to the coaching. Why do coaches allow their clients to dictate what goes on in their first layer? It's this feeling of acceptance. I want to be accepted. So if I don't get accepted, it's death to me. The reality is, if we look at the hierarchy of needs, your basic needs are met. You've got food, shelter, and security. Those needs are met. The third layer here is belonging. I want to belong. I want to be accepted. If I'm not accepted, that's death to me. I grew up in a lifestyle of, man, I want people to like me and approve of me. Well, they're trying to approve of themselves. So what do they have left to give to me? The reality is I need to accept myself, discover what aligns for me, communicate that clearly, and hold those boundaries as sacred and not allow others to cross them to dictate how I live my life. And so I think that's what happens with coaches, that happens in relationships, is that we allow people into our first layer. And thank you, Richard Paul Evans, for this, because this is your concept. If we keep people in their spheres, 1 through 5, the world being the furthest out, religion being fourth out, family and friends being second and third out, right? You and your source, God, higher power, higher self, however you want to look at it, are number one. If you're in alignment with that, number 2 takes care of itself. Number 3, 4, 5, 6. When you start allowing those in, that's when we have issues. So let me know if you have questions around this. I know there's going to be people on here that are in my second, third, fourth layers out that are going to try and come into my first layer and tell me how I should see this, which is okay. I'm open to hearing your views. I get to ultimately decide what aligns for me, just like you. And so tell me what you're hearing in this. If you want to comment and you're not clear or you've got questions, go ahead and do that, and then I'll respond back to those. Make sure you like the video and share it. It's good to see you guys on there. Good morning, Kelly and Natalia. It's good to see you guys here. And I know more will join later. So I'm going to finish up. And again, like the video, share it, and leave some comments below. Talk to you in the next video.